What if I told you that the single most powerful thing you can do for your body, your brain, and your long-term survival doesn't require a gym membership, an expensive supplement, or a grueling workout routine? What if the secret that doctors, pharmaceutical companies, and the fitness industry have quietly buried was something so simple, so ancient, and so completely free that it almost sounds insulting? Here's the truth that nobody is talking about loudly enough. Walking, done correctly, with the right frequency, the right intensity, and the right duration, is one of the most transformative biological interventions available to the human body. And before you roll your eyes and click away, understand this: we are not talking about casual strolling. We are talking about a deliberate, daily practice that has been scientifically proven to grow your brain, protect your eyesight, reset your pancreas, rebuild your spine, and chemically rewire your mental state. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will never look at a simple walk the same way again. Let's begin with something that will genuinely shock you, and I mean that in the most literal sense. Right now, over 35 million people around the world are living with dementia or Alzheimer's disease. 35 million, and that number is not staying still. Scientists are projecting it to double within the next 20 years, meaning that within a single generation, more people than the entire population of Canada will be experiencing catastrophic memory loss. These are mothers forgetting their children's names. These are fathers who cannot remember where they live. These are brilliant minds dissolving, not suddenly, but slowly, piece by piece, over years. And the terrifying part is that most people believe this is inevitable, a cruel lottery of genetics and aging with no real prevention. But here is what a landmark study out of the University of Kansas discovered, and it changes everything. Sedentary behavior, meaning simply sitting too much and moving too little, is one of the primary accelerants of cognitive decline. The key to understanding how walking protects the brain comes down to one word that most people have never heard outside of a biology class.
Polluted air
That
makes
word
breathing
is
difficult and damages your
hippocampus
lungs.
is the region of your brain
Clean air
responsible
keeps
for
your
memory
lungs
formation,
healthy and
spatial
strong.
navigation, and learning. Think of it as the hard drive of your mind. And here is what researchers have confirmed through brain imaging studies. When people stop moving regularly, the hippocampus physically shrinks. The hard drive degrades. But when people walk consistently, something extraordinary happens. The brain releases a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which acts essentially like fertilizer for your neurons. Walking also increases blood flow directly into brain tissue, stimulating the growth of new blood vessels and new neural connections. The result is measurable. Walkers don't just slow brain shrinkage, they reverse it. They are physically building a bigger, denser, more resilient brain with every step they take. And that is not poetry, that is peer-reviewed neuroscience. Now let's move to a benefit that sounds so strange, so counterintuitive, that most people assume it must be wrong when they first hear it. Walking protects your eyesight. I know, you're probably asking yourself what moving your legs has to do with your eyes, and the answer is everything once you understand the mechanism. Glaucoma is one of the leading causes of irreversible blindness in the world. It does not announce itself loudly. It doesn't come with sudden, dramatic symptoms in the early stages. It quietly builds pressure inside the eye, pressing against the optic nerve until the damage is done and the vision is gone. The Glaucoma Research Foundation has confirmed a critical link between physical activity and intraocular pressure regulation. When you walk, your cardiovascular system becomes a secondary pressure management system for your entire body, including your eyes. Blood flow becomes more regulated, fluid dynamics inside the eye stabilize, and the dangerous pressure that crushes optic nerves is systematically reduced. What makes walking particularly remarkable in this context is what it doesn't do. High-intensity exercise, sprinting, heavy weightlifting, intense HIIT sessions can actually spike in intraocular pressure during and immediately after the workout, which is dangerous for people already at risk for glaucoma. Walking sits in the precise physiological sweet spot. It activates your cardiovascular system enough to improve blood flow and lower baseline pressure without triggering the kind of acute spikes that more extreme exercise can produce. So every time you lace up your shoes and head out the door, you are not just doing something good for your heart and your waistline. You are quite literally walking away from blindness. That phrase is not a metaphor. It is a biological description of what is actually happening inside your eyes with every step you take. Moving on, let's talk about your heart, and let's demolish one of the most persistent myths in the fitness world while we're at it. For decades, the culture around cardiovascular health has been dominated by one idea. If you aren't running, you aren't doing enough. Runners get the marathons, the medals, the reputation for serious health commitment. Walkers get the quiet park and the polite nod. But the American Heart Association, one of the most rigorous research bodies in cardiovascular medicine, published findings that shattered this hierarchy completely. When it comes to preventing coronary heart disease and stroke, two of the leading killers in the developed world, walking is just as effective as running. Read that again. Not almost as effective, not a reasonable substitute for people who can't run. Just as effective, period, when adjusted for the same energy expenditure. The mechanism comes down to blood pressure modulation, arterial elasticity, and cholesterol management. Here is why this matters practically. Running, particularly long-distance running at high intensity, triggers a significant cortisol response in the body. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and while short bursts are manageable, chronically elevated cortisol from excessive high-intensity exercise can damage arterial walls, suppress immune function, and contribute to the very inflammation that causes heart disease. Walking produces none of these negative hormonal side effects. Instead, it acts like a natural beta blocker, gently widening the arteries, lowering resting blood pressure, reducing bad LDL cholesterol, and increasing beneficial HDL cholesterol, all without the physiological cost of extreme exertion. You are cleaning your arteries, strengthening your heart, and protecting your vascular system every single day, and you are doing it without thrashing your adrenal system in the process. That is not a compromise. That is an upgrade. Let's shift now to something most people never connect to a daily walk, and that is the health of your lungs. Your lungs are not passive organs. They do not simply sit in your chest waiting for air to arrive. They are active, dynamic filters that respond dramatically to the demands you place on them. And when you sit for most of the day, which is the reality for the majority of adults in modern society, your lungs stagnate. Breathing becomes shallow. The lower lobes of the lungs, the regions that are most prone to fluid and waste gas accumulation, receive very little ventilation. Over time, this creates a physiological environment that is far more vulnerable to infection, inflammation, and respiratory disease. Walking changes this picture immediately and measurably. The moment you begin walking at a moderate pace, your diaphragm is forced to engage more deeply. Your breathing rate increases. Oxygen floods into your bloodstream at a higher volume than it does when you are at rest. But the hidden benefit, the one that rarely gets discussed, is what happens to the gases leaving your body during a brisk walk. Every exhale during aerobic activity expels waste gases that have accumulated in the lower regions of the lungs during prolonged sitting. You are effectively flushing your respiratory system, clearing out the biological stagnation that collects when you don't move. This has a direct knock-on effect on immune function. The stress of chronic lung dysfunction, even mild dysfunction that most people never consciously notice, suppresses the immune system in subtle but meaningful ways. When you walk daily, you are not just training your lungs, you are reinforcing one of your body's primary defensive barriers against illness. People who ask why they keep getting sick every winter should consider this before reaching for another vitamin C tablet. The answer might be that their lungs need movement, not supplementation. Now we arrive at the benefit that genuinely surprised even me when I first encountered the research, and that is what walking does for blood sugar regulation and diabetes prevention. Most people assume that if the goal is metabolic health, more intense exercise must produce better results. That logic feels intuitive. Work harder, burn more, get healthier. But Duke University ran a 6-month clinical trial that turned this assumption completely on its head. They put runners and walkers head-to-head, comparing their outcomes on glucose tolerance, one of the primary markers of diabetes risk. The walkers didn't just keep up with the runners, they outperformed them. The walkers showed a 6 times greater improvement in glucose tolerance than the runners over the same time period. 6 times. That number deserves a moment of silence because it is genuinely extraordinary, and it exposes how fundamentally misunderstood metabolic fitness is in popular culture. The mechanism here is about efficiency, not intensity. When you sprint or engage in high-intensity interval training, your body burns through glucose rapidly and urgently, like an engine running on full throttle. That's useful in certain contexts, but it doesn't necessarily train your body to manage blood sugar more intelligently. Walking, by contrast, trains your muscles to draw on glucose steadily and sustainably over a longer period. This trains your cells to become more sensitive to insulin, meaning your body needs to produce less of it to achieve the same regulatory effect. This gives your pancreas, an organ that millions of people are silently burning out through poor diet and sedentary living, a chance to recover and operate at a sustainable level. If you are pre-diabetic, if you have been told your blood sugar is trending in the wrong direction, this research should feel like a lifeline, because it is one. Let's talk about your gut, because your digestive system is far more connected to your overall health than most people appreciate, and walking has a direct mechanical impact on how it functions. The gut is lined with muscles, and like any muscle, it needs to be activated. When you sit for long periods of time, the rhythmic contractions that move food and waste through your digestive tract, a process called peristalsis, slow down. Food stagnates, waste accumulates, inflammation increases. This is not a minor inconvenience. A study tracking more than 150,000 people found a stark and sobering correlation between sedentary behavior and colon cancer mortality. Active people survived colon cancer at significantly higher rates than sedentary people, and the intervention that made the difference wasn't chemotherapy optimization or surgical technique. It was movement, it was walking. 10,000 steps executed with proper form and deliberate intensity can rival a conventional gym workout in terms of muscular engagement, caloric expenditure, and overall body composition improvement. And here is the critical advantage that walking has over high-impact gym training. There is no recovery time. When you tear muscle fibers through heavy lifting or explosive training, your body needs 48 to 72 hours to repair the damage. During that window, you can't train that muscle group again. But walking is low impact enough that you can do it every single day without accumulating damage. That means instead of getting 3 or 4 intense workout sessions per week, you're getting 7 consistent, body-activating, metabolism-stimulating sessions. The compound effect of that daily consistency over weeks, months, and years is staggering.
The form matters enormously here, and most people walk without any awareness of their mechanics. Spine straight, not rigidly military, but aligned. Elbows bent at 90 degrees and driving deliberately backward with each stride. Pelvis stabilized, meaning your hips are not swinging wildly side to side, but tracking with controlled efficiency. Chin parallel to the ground, eyes forward, not staring at your phone. When you walk with this kind of intentional form, you engage your core, your glutes, your hip flexors, your upper back, and your shoulders simultaneously. This is not a casual stroll. This is full body activation, and the difference in results between someone who walks deliberately and someone who shuffles aimlessly is enormous, even if they cover the same distance. Now let's talk about your bones, because what happens to your skeleton when you walk consistently is one of the most fascinating and least understood stories in the science of human movement. Most people know in a vague way that exercise is good for bone density, but the specific mechanism by which walking strengthens bone goes far deeper than most realize. When your foot strikes the ground during a walk, it creates a small but significant mechanical stress that travels up through your skeletal structure. This mechanical stress triggers a piezoelectric effect, meaning it generates a tiny electrical charge within the bone tissue itself. That electrical signal acts as a direct communication to the cells responsible for building new bone, called osteoblasts. It essentially tells them to get to work, to lay down new bone matrix to reinforce the structure. You are electrically signaling your skeleton to become stronger, denser, and more resistant to fracture with every single step. Running can actually be counterproductive in this regard for many people, particularly those who are older or who have existing joint issues, because the impact forces are dramatically higher and can cause stress fractures and joint degradation faster than the body can repair them. Walking provides the precise level of mechanical stress needed to stimulate bone growth without the destructive overload that high-impact activities can produce. The Arthritis Foundation specifically recommends 30 minutes of daily walking is one of the most effective interventions for reducing inflammation and supporting skeletal health. If you were worried about osteoporosis, if you have a family history of fractures, if you have been told that your bone density is declining, this is not a passive suggestion. This is an active, evidence-based countermeasure that is completely within your control right now. Your spine deserves its own conversation because back pain has become so normalized in modern society that most people simply accept it as an inevitable part of adult life. It is not inevitable. It is largely a consequence of the way we live, specifically the way we sit for hours without moving, and the way we engage in high-impact activities that compress and damage spinal structures without providing any rehabilitative benefit. Walking is uniquely positioned to address back pain because of something most people don't know about how spinal discs work. Unlike most tissues in the body, spinal discs have no direct blood supply. They cannot receive nutrients or expel waste through conventional circulation. Instead, they rely entirely on a compression and release mechanism, essentially a pumping action, to draw in nutrients and push out metabolic waste. Walking provides exactly this pumping action in a gentle, rhythmic, and sustainable way that no other activity quite replicates. Every step you take slightly compresses and then decompresses your spinal discs, feeding them the nutrients they need to remain hydrated, flexible, and capable of absorbing shock. At the same time, walking strengthens the erector spinae muscles, the long muscles that run along either side of your spine and are responsible for holding you upright. As these muscles develop strength and endurance, your posture improves, the load on your spinal discs reduces, and the chronic tension that causes most back pain begins to resolve. People who have lived with back pain for years often report significant improvements within just a few weeks of establishing a consistent daily walking habit. They aren't taking new medication, they aren't visiting a new specialist, they are simply moving their bodies the way their bodies were designed to move, and the spine responds with profound gratitude. We come now to the final benefit, and in many ways the most important one, because without mental health, none of the physical benefits matter nearly as much as they should. The Journal of Psychiatric Research conducted a study with 50 individuals who had been diagnosed with major depressive disorder. These were not people experiencing mild sadness or a rough week. These were clinically diagnosed patients with serious, life-altering depression. The intervention was walking 30 minutes a day, and the results were, by any clinical standard, remarkable. Walking systematically dismantled their symptoms, not through sedation, not through chemical intervention that numbed their feelings, but through a genuine biochemical shift in how their brains were functioning. The mechanism operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Walking burns off cortisol, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, is one of the primary drivers of anxiety and depression. At the same time, it triggers the release of endorphins and that BDNF we discussed earlier, which supports the growth of new neural connections in exactly the regions of the brain most affected by depression. Iowa State University added another layer to this picture, with research showing that walking improved mood in study participants, even when they weren't specifically told the purpose of the study, and even when the walking was done indoors on a treadmill with no scenic or social benefit. The improvement was purely physiological. This matters enormously because it means the antidepressant effect of walking is not about distraction or fresh air or getting out of the house. It is about chemistry. It is about forcing your nervous system out of the neurological patterns that sustain depression and anxiety. There is something deeply profound happening when a body that was folded inward, stationary, withdrawing from the world, begins to move forward with purpose and rhythm. Depression and forward motion are, as the research suggests, genuinely biologically incompatible. You cannot sustain the same neurochemical state of depression while your body is actively, deliberately moving. Something has to give, and when you walk consistently, every single day, what gives is the depression. Now that you understand what walking does to your body and your brain, let's talk about how to do it correctly, because most people are leaving the majority of these benefits on the table through poor execution. The framework is called the FIT formula, and it stands for frequency, intensity, and time. These three variables determine whether your daily walk is a life-changing biological protocol or just a pleasant way to spend 30 minutes. Frequency comes first, and it is non-negotiable. The goal is every single day, not 5 days a week when it's convenient, not whenever the weather is nice. Every day. Your cells need a consistent daily signal to reprogram themselves. If you were just starting out, if you have been sedentary for a long time, begin with 3 to 5 days a week and build. If you can only do 5 minutes at first, do 5 minutes, but do it with regularity because it is the repetition that creates the biological change, not the individual session. Intensity is where most people get it wrong in two directions. Either they stroll so casually that their heart rate never meaningfully elevates, or they push so hard that they turn what should be a sustainable daily practice into something they dread and eventually abandon. The target zone is what exercise physiologists call the talk test zone. You should be moving at roughly 2 to 3 miles per hour. You should be able to hold a conversation, but it should require a small effort. If you can sing comfortably, you're moving too slowly. If you are gasping and cannot string 2 words together, you are moving too fast. Find the sweet spot where your breathing is elevated, your heart is engaged, and you feel the warmth of genuine exertion without tipping into distress. That is the precise intensity range where the cardiovascular, metabolic, and neurological benefits of walking are maximized. Time is the final variable, and the research converges clearly at 30 minutes as the threshold where the profound biological shifts we have discussed really kick in. Below that threshold, you get some benefits. Above it, you amplify the results. 6,000 steps is a more achievable baseline than the famous 10,000 steps figure that has become culturally embedded, and starting with 6,000 is far more sustainable for most people than an arbitrary goal that feels overwhelming. Once 6,000 steps feels genuinely easy and natural, expand. The practical rules that compound these 3 factors are simple. Drink water before you walk. A dehydrated body is a compromised body, and a compromised body cannot extract maximum benefit from any exercise. Swing your arms actively with elbows bent because this engages your upper body and increases caloric expenditure by up to 10% compared to walking with arms hanging passively. And walk at the same time every day, preferably in the morning, because this habit anchoring resets your circadian rhythm and makes the practice sustainable instead of something you have to negotiate with yourself about every afternoon. Here is the thing that should genuinely make you angry in the most productive possible way. The pharmaceutical industry spends billions of dollars every year marketing solutions to problems that a pair of shoes and a 30-minute walk could prevent or significantly mitigate. The industry profits enormously from the belief that fitness requires equipment, memberships, trainers, and technology, and the culture of busyness that dominates modern life makes movement feel like a luxury that has to be earned around the edges of an already packed schedule. All of these forces converge to keep you sedentary, and all of them benefit from your sedentary condition. The greatest act of rebellion available to you right now, the single most defiant thing you can do,